Thanks so much for coming to the session. I want to make sure that you get the most out of this. So I'd love this to be interactive so that you guys actually get some meat out of the presentation. Good morning. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of building a better retirement program. And a lot of us are looking at our retirement programs as a true benefit today. We're not thinking about them as a check the box like they used to be. Actually, there was a survey done among employees asking them why they went to work for specific companies. And of course, the number one reason was salary. What a surprise. But the second reason that they went was because of the benefit package. And if you design your retirement program properly, you can actually save your money, your company money, because we're actually able to get people to retirement at a comfortable age as opposed to having an older workforce that increases our health care costs. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how I would design a better program, and hopefully the pieces that I put together for you today will help you take this back to the office and say, okay, are there things that we should be kind of tweaking to perhaps get a more successful retirement program? Real quick, just a little bit about who Cafaro Greenleaf is. We've been around for about 35 years. I've been helping plan sponsors and participants for a little over 20 years. And my mission and our mission is that we believe all hardworking people should retire with dignity. How many of us in the room sit on an investment committee right now? Anybody? Are you decision makers on the retirement programs that you're involved in? So what I would encourage you to do is, if you sit on a committee or you're involved in it, make sure that your committee has a mission statement, because what we find is when we start building a retirement program, we have a lot of different opinions. We might have one from HR, we might have one from finance, we may have an employee involved in the process. And everybody's viewing it very differently, but by having a mission in what your retirement program should do will help making decisions very easy. So everything that I'm going to talk to you today about is about fulfilling my mission, which is I believe that all hardworking individuals should retire with dignity. Before we go forward, I'm going to take you way back. I'm going to take you back to the 19th century. Retirement programs back there were very simple. There was none. We were all farmers, either died out in the field, or if you couldn't work in the field any longer, you were brought into the house, and there were generations, multiple generations, that would take care of us. So retirement wasn't really something that we thought about back then. But as labor kind of changed, and people actually started to work outside of the farms, there was a realization that employees were stopping working, and then they needed some type of benefit, something to replace their income when they retired. So in 1875, American Express, which happened to be a railroad company, started their first pension plan. So that's how far back retirement programs go. In 1935, Roosevelt realized that there was a group of individuals that were working for organizations that didn't have access to pension plans. So Social Security was brought into effect. Interesting that Social Security was that you paid into it, and at age 65 you received money out of it. Very similar to what we have today, and that's going back to 1935. The difference today is that in 1930s, our average lifespan was age 61. So we were eligible for benefits that the majority of us would never receive. Today, we're eligible for benefits in our 60s, but we're living well into our 80s. Makes you wonder why the Social Security system is not working any longer. So as we kind of move through the lifespan of retirement programs, in the 1940s, we started to see a lot more unions kind of come together. And as unions came together, they started to recognize that their employees were leaving the workforce in their early 40s, mid-40s, and then they were having to wait to either die or to be eligible for Social Security. And they noticed that there was a gap that needed to be filled. When they stopped working, who was going to replace that income that they used to have from their job? So they realized right off the bat that we needed to fill a gap. very much like we're talking about today. Why do we have retirement programs? Because we're looking to fill a gap, to bridge the gap between when we stop working and the day that we pass. We're going to jump ahead now to the 1970s. 1970, ERISA came on board. It's the governing body that we're dealing with currently right now. Everything is under ERISA. And it was set up basically to make sure that the people that were managing the money for the pension plans weren't misusing them. In the 1980s, we saw 401k come into existence. So 401k plans are not really that old if you think about it. So they're still in kind of an infant stage. And then in the 1990s, we had this great thought that, hey, why not pay taxes today? Let that money grow tax-free, and when you retire, you can take it out. And so the Roth IRAs came into existence in 1997. Let's stay in the 80s for a while, and I should have brought my disco ball, because that's what I think of with the 80s. But how many of us were in the workforce in the 80s? Anybody here in the workforce in the 80s? If you remember at that time, thank you, there's one back there. Back in the 80s, we received a statement once a year. Remember, you would get your statement. It was for the year end, and you usually got it 6 months after the year end. And that was our profit sharing plan. The employer would put money away, they would issue a statement, they would manage our money for us. And we kind of had the sense still that the employer was taking care of us as an employee. We started to see a shift in kind of the direction that employers started to think about these benefits. And they really started to want to transfer that risk and liability off of them and place it onto us as employees. And what they noticed is that people weren't staying in the workforce working for the same company for 20 and 30 years. So they liked that there was portability in the 401k. They liked that you could have tax deferral. It was simple because you could take it from a payroll deduction. We could give you multiple investments. So how I was investing the money for all of you may not be how you want to invest your money. So we started to see a movement in kind of defining that benefit over to moving to defining that contribution. So in doing that, let me ask you, does anybody know how much money you need to have in order to have $648 a month for the rest of your life if you were retired today at age 65? Anybody? Guesses? Well, guess what? I don't know either. I'm not an actuary. And when you define a benefit, you have an actuary do a calculation. It's based upon our longevity. It's based upon the rate of return that we're going to receive. So when we moved from defining a benefit, now we're asking an employee to figure out how to replace $648 in income by defining the contribution. So there's a little bit of a disconnect here. And why is this a disconnect? Why are the DB plans kind of going by the wayside? Do you know that only 19% of the population actually have access to a defined benefit plan? And the majority of those people actually only have access to it because they work in a public entity or they're in a military. And even the public entities now are starting to change to a defined contribution. And one of the reasons that they're doing that is because they can't budget for them. This is what a defined benefit plan looks like, very raw, without being an actuary. If an employer promised $100 and they had to pay it in 20 years, and they assumed a rate of return of 8%, they would need to put away $21.46 today. However, the perfect world didn't happen, and they only received a rate of return of 6.6. So when they went to pay that employee the $100, there was only $77 left there. So in order to give them that benefit, they actually had to pay another $22. So it cost them over $44 to pay that benefit. However, had they known that they were only going to get a 6% rate of return, guess what? They would have put in $27, so it would have only cost them an extra $6. The problem is we can't predict where the market is going to go. And when we invest, we need to be extremely disciplined because if we make bad decisions at the wrong time, it's going to affect our outcome. So we've now taken defining a benefit to defining a contribution and putting all the onus on you, the employee, on accumulating enough income and making the right decisions moving forward. So now the risk of your retirement is borne by you as the employee as opposed to the employer. Now I will tell you that the government is looking to have it be borne back onto the employer by saying that, hey, you can offer this plan, but you have to prove that you are actually moving the needle, that people are participating, that you are actually providing a benefit when they go to retire. So as we build our perfect retirement program, these are the things that we need to be aware of. We have to remember that we have a lot of different risks, and if we understand those risks, we'll actually have better outcomes. First thing that you need to understand is we can build a perfect plan, but if we don't have collaboration with our vendor and or consultant and our participant, the plan is not going to go very far. But the things we have to solve for today in this course is accumulation. How do we get people to accumulate enough money to retire? Well, first thing is, most of us don't know how much we need to accumulate. How many of us know what you need to accumulate? Anybody? You know what your number is? I don't, because it changes every day. Why does it change? Because I have longevity. Am I going to die at age 87, live till age 94, die at age 82? I don't know. My mother's convinced that she's going to die with a dime in her pocket. She has 7 of us, and she said none of the kids are getting any money when she dies. I said, Mom, that's great, but you have no clue when you're going to die. But she's convinced she's going to die with a dime in her pocket. So we have to solve for accumulation, longevity, and now participant user risk. How many of us have been watching the market in the last couple of weeks? Have you had anybody knock on your door saying, oh my God, the market's down, it's the next crash, I need to get out, making the wrong decisions at the wrong time? Inflation risk. We haven't talked about that in a while because inflation hasn't been an issue. But when you talk to a retiree, the first thing that they're afraid of is outliving their money. The second thing that they're afraid of is their health care costs. They're going up on average 7% annually. That's inflation to them. We need to solve for that. And last but not least is something called transition risk. Transition risk is something that not a lot of people are talking about. But if I were to retire today with $100,000 and wanted to turn that into income, it would be dependent on where interest rates are, would be the amount of money that I would receive. However, if I retired 10 years prior to this and had the same $100,000, interest rates were a lot higher, that $100,000 would have produced more in income. That's transition risk, and we need to talk about that and solve for that. So before we solve for this, we need to understand kind of the basics. And what I mean by that is that everything that we do as a human race has some basic fundamentals. We are big believers in looking at the behavior of our participants. Having been in business for over 30 years, we've studied participants' behavior through different market cycles, different types of participants. But there's actually a science, it's called behavioral finance, which we're certified in. And it looks at our everyday behavior and how it's affecting our savings programs. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is present bias today. And present bias is the lack of self-control we have. For our future self, we want the best. But here and now, we want what we want. So here's an example of how present bias works, and we need to solve for this in our retirement program. So very similar to this, 7 days ago I called you and said, hey, at my presentation you're going to have the ability to have a snack. And when they asked participants what they wanted as a snack, 74% of them said, of course I'm going to take the banana, because that's what my future self would want, the healthy option. Only 26% of us actually admitted that we would prefer the chocolate. When we got to the conference and we said there's enough bananas and chocolate you can change your mind. Only 30% of us actually went for the banana. 70% of us went for the chocolate. So the reality is that this is a behavior that we all have. And the question is, how do we address it in our retirement program? How do we know that in the future we want to do what's best for us as long as it doesn't affect us today? So let's take a look at how we're solving for some of those things. So the first thing that we're trying to do is to give more education, more tools to our participants and our plan sponsors to solve for this. So one of the things that you'll notice is that a lot of the providers out there now have retirement tools for participants where you can go on and you can say, what do I look like in the future based upon what I'm saving today? So you get a picture of what you look like. Other things that they're doing, providers are now offering tools to help you as plan sponsors identify the groups that perhaps need some additional help. The Department of Labor is actually considering putting on our statements that we receive quarterly a retirement income replacement ratio, so that you would actually see what your savings today, what it would give you in retirement. Right now they have 9 calculations that they're thinking about, which is kind of pathetic. Can you imagine opening your statement and getting 9 calculations on there for your retirement income? Of course, I'm going to choose the highest one and everything is good. So we'll see how that goes on. Any of you involved, you said that you have Prudential as your provider. Do you have an investment vehicle that allows a participant at retirement to get a guaranteed income for life? Okay. So anybody in here have an investment product that your participant could utilize to get a guaranteed income for life? This is something that is relatively new to the industry. It's a whisper right now. I'm a huge advocate for it. Why do we set up retirement programs? Because we're trying to replace income when we go to retire. So having a product like this in your plan, to me, is a must. But that's my personal opinion. So what else are we doing? As an industry, we're looking at plan design optimization. We're looking at utilizing our company contributions in a more effective way. And by that, we're looking at reconstructing our company contributions. If you were to stand around a water cooler and ask somebody what your company is matching, you might say, oh, 5%, 6%, 10%, 2%. You're not saying 50 cents on the dollar up to 6%, 25 cents on the dollar up to 10%. You're just saying a percentage. So if we know that the average participant will go to where the maximum match is and stop, why aren't we making the maximum match 10%? Why aren't we using the same dollars and stretching that match out to 10 or 15% to get our employees to reach that extra mile? Do you know what you should be saving right now? In general, we should be putting around 15% of our salary away. The closer we are to retirement, we should be putting 25% of our salary away. That's a big chunk of change. Most of us can't afford to do that. But if we can stretch them to save an extra dollar by changing our company contribution, it's going to make a difference when they go to retire. The other thing that a lot of people are using, auto-enrollment. Anybody have an auto-enrollment feature in their plan? Okay. Auto-enrollment is about 50% of the population is using that in their 401k right now. And they also have auto-escalation. Why is auto-enrollment so effective? Well, let's go back to our behavior study. Anybody in here an organ donor? Okay. So I always wanted to be an organ donor even when I was 17 and I first got my license. But it took me almost 20 years to check the box on the back of the program, the back of the driver's license to actually put that into effect. Very similar to Germany and Austria. They both also have a box that you have to check to either opt in to donate your organs or opt out by not donating your organs. What percentage do you think of people in Germany donate their organs? Just guess a number. 25, good guess. Any other guesses? It's 12%. 12% actually check the box. It's probably very close to what the US is. What percentage of people in Austria do you think don't donate their organs? Pick a percentage. Anybody?
20.
20, thank you. It's actually 1. 1% don't donate organs. So if you die, make sure you die, or if you need an organ, make sure that you go to Austria. 99% of the population donates their organs. Inertia is very strong. We are procrastinators by nature. We want to do what's in our best interest. We never get around to it, and that's why auto-enrollment works so well. The problem is that we stopped, and we actually are hurting participants right now. Because what was the average auto-enrollment rate that we put into place? What's your auto-enrollment? 6. You're very high. That's fantastic. Most opted to use 3%. This slide is very hard to see, but 47% of the plans out there using auto-enrollment do it at 3%. The problem is now inertia sets in. Everybody stops at 3%. If you don't add auto-escalation, those participants remain at 3% for the lifetime of their program. You'll notice only 13% of all plans out there have auto-escalation. So we've basically set our participants up to save 3%. If you have auto-enrollment, you have to have auto-escalation. It is a must. And that's how you get around inertia. Because inertia is not only going to keep them in the plan at 3%, it's going to keep them in the plan at 4, at 5, at 6. Every year you're going to find it goes up. And something that's very interesting, if you auto-enroll at 3% or you auto-enroll at 6%, the opt-out ratio is less at 6% than it is at 3%. Opt-out ratio is about 4%, where people actually get out of it. With education, it's about 1. We went around and surveyed employees, why did they opt out at 3 and not at 6? And they said at 6, I got my statement, and I actually had some money in there. So I thought, hey, this is meaningful and relevant to me. At 3%, it was a couple dollars. Didn't mean anything to me. I figured, why am I doing this? So I would encourage you to look to auto-enroll at 6%. So we've talked about saving with present bias. We've talked about inertia and adding auto-enrollment and auto-escalation, so save more. Now let's talk about that discipline, where we saw that, hey, how do we in a perfect world get that average rate of return of 8% as opposed to getting 6%? Well, unfortunately, I can tell you I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't get you 6% or 8%. I don't know what I'm going to get you. But I know that long term is much better than short-term goal thinking when it comes to investment. So we need to stay disciplined. And how are we as an industry doing that? We're utilizing target date funds. How many of us have target date funds in their 401k plan? Okay. So target date funds are an asset allocation model that's actively managed, and as you get closer to retirement, it becomes more conservative. It's a perfect set it and forget it. When I was 20, I enrolled in my 401k. I haven't changed my asset allocation until I was about 35. Between age 20 and 35, nothing changed in my portfolio. It just went up and down. At 35, I ended up getting into a target date fund. I will never do anything other than that because I don't want to think about it. It's a set it and forget it. If you're not using target date funds, modeled portfolios work really well. Asset allocation services. I believe 90% of our participants should be in some type of asset allocation model because most of us don't have the time, the knowledge, or the discipline to actually invest properly. So going forward, if I have a target date fund, I don't have to worry about it. 47% of the employers out there use target date funds, and 80% of our assets are flowing into those target date funds. So you can see There's a huge push on that. The other great thing is that they qualify under a QDIA, the Qualified Default Investment Option, so you have a safe harbor. What a lot of our plan sponsors are doing right now is they're re-enrolling everybody into target date funds. Why? Because they have the safe harbor, and the other reason is because they recognize that most people went down the lineup of investments and went 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, oh, that equals 100%, I'm good. Or they picked the top three, a third, a third, a third, I'm good. Re-enrolling them into target date funds puts them back into a better asset allocation model. And why is that so important? Because we make bad decisions at the wrong time. So logically we know we should buy what? Low and sell high. But when you open your statement and you see this, and you see that the market was down 57%, are you jumping for joy saying, hey, I should put more money in my 401k? No, you're saying, get me out of this, I'm really uncomfortable. But if you stay in the market, you actually historically have gotten a 7 to 8 or 9% rate of return, depending on how long you've been. So how do we close the volatility? And just to tell you what this chart is, it's from 1997 through March of 2015. It's probably more volatile today than this slide is showing. And this is just the S&P 500, nothing more than the stock market. So you can see all the ups and downs that we've had. And why is it so important that we kind of reduce this volatility? Well, let's go back to our behavior. So there's something called loss aversion that we all experience. And loss aversion means that we feel loss 2 times stronger than we feel gains. Pretty amazing, isn't it? So they did this study. So the apples here, it says basically 2 minus 1 does not equal 1. And what they did is they did a study on 2 groups of monkeys. Group A, group of monkeys, received 1 apple. All very happy. Group B also received 1 apple. Both groups very happy. Group B, they went in and gave another apple to. So now Group B has 2 apples and Group 1 has 1 apple. Group 1, perfectly happy. Group 2, same as having 1 apple. They then went into Group B and took away the 1 apple. Now Group B has 1 apple and Group A has 1 apple. Group A, very happy, eating their apple. Group B, not eating their apple, throwing their apple around, jumping on each other, hysterical, banging on the cage, yet they had 1 apple. And they were perfectly happy with the 1 apple until they had 2, and then we took 1 away. So it's really important that we address this, and how we address that is reducing that volatility, reducing the percentage of loss. And how we do that is we found that target date funds will reduce that. So this is a study that was done by JP Morgan over the past 5 years, and it was actually in 2007, and they looked at a 5-year time frame from 2007. And they looked at all the different participants that they had in their programs. So they had people in managed accounts, target date funds, people that did it themselves through the core lineup, people that changed strategies. In other words, they had like a target date fund and then they moved out of it. And also we had people that had brokerage accounts. So we know who the people that have the brokerage accounts, those are usually our executives that, you know, I know what I need, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Well, over those 5 years, the average rate of return, well, let's look at the highs and the lows. The brokerage account users, the low was 6.8. The top end was 9% that they got as their rate of return. Their average rate of return was less than 1%. They were pretty much even. Yet, if we look at the target date, the set it and forget it, their low was 0.4. So not even a negative, and their high was 5.1, but their average rate of return was 2.7. Because they stayed during the difficult times, because we reduced that volatility, their outcomes were better. So again, re-enrolling people into target date funds, using models, just minimizing the ability for them to make bad decisions makes a huge difference in their outcome. So with all of this said, let's kind of take a look at where we are today as an industry, because we still have a lot of work to do, and then I'll tell you how I would build my perfect plan. We still only have about 40% of people on track to reach their retirement goals. Scary when you think about it, especially because 10,000 people every day for the next 25 years are retiring. That means 6,000 of them are ill-prepared for retirement. We have a false sense of security because we have this account balance. There's an illusion of wealth. We get calls from participants. We had one call from a participant that said to us, I want to find out how I stop my contributions. We said, well, tell us a little bit about why you're stopping it. Well, I just got my statement and I have $110,000 in there, and that's a lot of money. And we said, absolutely, that's a ton of money. How old are you? Oh, I'm 52. When are you planning on retiring? Oh, probably 67. I love my job. Well, let me tell you what that 110 is going to produce in income. Laid it out for them. Can you live on that? My God, no, I can't live on that. They actually ended up increasing their contribution. But we have this false sense that we're wealthy when we get our statement. I do. I look at my statement, I'm like, whew, I never could have saved this. I live from paycheck to paycheck. I'm spending my money before I get it in my pocket, let alone having this big chunk of money. So we have an issue there that we have to address. When we look at our contributions, a third of our participants are contributing enough to reach our to get the full company match. Why is that? Because the average company match is 50 cents on the dollar up to 6%. What's our average auto enrollment? 3%. That's why we're not getting there. Our deferral rates are low. Why? Because we opted them in at 3 and we've left them there, setting them up for a horrible retirement. And the other thing is that we have a discipline issue. One, we've got too many investments. They actually did a study where someone walked into a pen store and you could walk over to a counter and there were 3 pens, or you could walk over to another counter and there were 17 pens. So you could either pick one of the 3 or one of the 17. The sales at the one of the 3 were much higher, I don't remember the exact number, but it was crazy, than the sales of the pens of 17. Why? Because when I walked over to the 17, it got overwhelming for me. When I walked over to the 3, oh yeah, I'll take this one. Think about when you walk into a grocery store and look at all the cereal boxes. I have kids and they always want cereal. And I walk in and I'm like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed by the choices. So you have to be careful that you don't put too many choices in there. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is retirement programs are set up for retirement. But we have allowed people to borrow from their retirement accounts. That's what we call leakage. And I think that it's perfectly okay for us to allow people to borrow, but it shouldn't be a Christmas club. So how do we manage that? Well, you can borrow one loan at a time. Once you pay it off, you have to wait 12 months before you pick up another loan. Why? Because it makes you think before you borrow. If you have multiple loans and can get money anytime you want, of course, Christmas comes, holidays come, yeah, I'll just run to my 401k plan and grab the money out of that. So we need to address that. So how would I build my perfect retirement program? Remember, my mission is to get everybody to retire with dignity. I would use auto enrollment of at least 6%. I would do auto escalation, not 1% a year, but 2% a year, because the difference is not going to make a difference in the participant's mind. Remember, we have to opt in or out of our health care benefits annually. Why don't we have to do that with our retirement benefits? So annually, if you opted out this year, next year, I'm going to re-enroll you unless you opt out again. So I would do that. I would also re-enroll everybody into target date funds. Target date funds or an asset allocation model, because I know that we are a society that inertia takes over and we want to set it and forget it. We don't want to think about it every day. But most important, we need to transition from the illusion of wealth to cash flow. Do you know how much you're going to get in Social Security benefits? Most of us know a rough amount because we've gotten a statement or now we have to go online to get it. But do you know how much money you put into Social Security? We don't. All we care about is the income. We probably don't want to know what we put into Social Security. The reality is we need to get people focused on the income side of it, not on the accumulation side. Because the accumulation stage is the end of the beginning. If I make a mistake during accumulation, I just put more money in. I work a little longer. Maybe I don't want to, but I can fix it. But the distribution stage must last until the end. If I make the wrong choice when I retire on how I take my money out, it could devastate me. I could live in a cardboard box. So it's really important that we address this. So as you go back to your office and you think about building your perfect retirement program, you want to look at how things impact your plan. How are the fees being paid? And how are they impacting your employees? Are you an employer writing out a check? Are they being paid through the investments? How are you paying the fees and what kind of impact do they have on the outcome? The impact of your plan design. Do you have auto-enrollment? Should you have auto-enrollment? Do you have auto-escalation? Should you have auto-escalation? The impact of how you make company contributions. If you're making a profit-sharing contribution, it goes in once a year. Most employees don't even see it as a benefit. If you're making a matching contribution, it goes in every single time that your employee puts money in. It's meaningful and relevant to them. Now you need to get them to kind of focus on getting to the max. So how do we do that? The impact of the investments you offer. Trust me, you have 27 investment options to choose from. Most people are going to say, I have no clue. You have 4, they're going to be able to make a good investment decision on how to invest their portfolio. Do you know that John Hancock did a study across the country and asked people what a money market account was? Just money market. What percentage of individuals do you think knew what a money market account was? Take a guess. 8%. 8%. 8%. Yet we're putting together a lineup of 27 funds, and 8% even know what a money market account is. It's kind of scary. The impact of education. So a lot of us may have a vendor that comes out to do education. Great. Stand up, give you the canned presentation. Any questions? Oh yeah, how do I reset my PIN number? Oh, where am I get my beneficiary? It's not relevant or meaningful. If I talk to a group of people that are 20 and then I talk to a group of people that are 55, what is most important to them is very different. So your education program, your financial wellness program has to be catered and geared to your demographics of your organization, and it has to be broken down so that it's meaningful and relevant to the people that you're trying to touch. I even go so far as break it down by women and men. Guess what? We do think differently. And how you communicate. You know, so just a quick story for you. We had an organization that they used to put the magazines out at the 7-Eleven stores. So they have a big warehouse, and every morning all the drivers would go to the warehouse and they would pick up their deliveries to go around and give the magazines to their 7-Eleven stores. So when we did education at any of these facilities, we might have 1 or 2 drivers that were willing to stay. Mind you, this organization had 2,500 employees that we were trying to touch. We could get 1 or 2 at each location. Not meaningful, not relevant, didn't make any sense. So what we did is we put together an iPodcast. Why did we do an iPodcast? Well, we knew that they were sitting in a truck all day. What are they listening to? The radio. Plug this in, they had the ability to get educated as they were on the road. But let's say they got educated and they liked that idea of, hey, I should be saving or I should be making changes. If they didn't have the ability to get on a computer or call, it was all in vain. So what we did is we put together a postage paid envelope that allowed them to listen to the iPodcast and say, yeah, I should enroll, or I should increase my contribution, or I should go into the target date funds. And they literally could check a box, sign it, put it in the postage paid envelope, and at their next stop, drop it in the mailbox. We increased participation levels there. The average deferral was over 7% for truck drivers. And they used to have 50% of their assets in stable value, and it shrunk to 20%. Just because we were giving them meaningful, relevant information, communicating it properly. Those are the types of things you want to look. See if your provider or your consultant is moving the needle. If they're showing up, that's not enough. They need to actually move the needle. So as I'll leave you today, first thing I want to make sure, so important, have a mission statement. Why are you offering this program? Is it to retain? Is it to attract? Is it to reward your employees? Is it to make sure that they retire with dignity? If you don't have a mission, it's very difficult to get to that end game. Make sure that you have principles that have been set up to make your retirement plan successful. And what do I mean by that? So let's say that transparency is something that's important to you. Transparency is a must. That's your principle. I'm going to get people to retire with dignity, and it's going to be in a very transparent way. And then make sure that you have systems in place to actually have impact. If you have an educator, if somebody stands in front of your participants, monitor how that's actually impacting them. If you change providers and you change fees, make sure that that's impacting your participants in a relevant way. Questions, comments, concerns, discussion, I would love audience participation. I am not usually one to talk at people. So.
What do you think the right number of elections is? I mean, you said 4. Do you really need 4?
So I think it all depends on the demographics of the organization. So when we walk into an organization, our job is to learn about the culture, and we look at the average account balance, and we also look at the average age. Because your younger generation tend to be more sophisticated in some ways because they're on the internet a lot. So your lineup can be a little bit larger. Your older population, people that are in the 50s, they're more concerned with the basics because they recognize that they have a very short period of time. So if you give them too much, they're overwhelmed by that. So the number is really going to be dependent on your organization. But I think if you get over 12 core lineup, you're gonna, it's too much. It's too much. And the city of Los Angeles had us come in to talk about what they were gonna do to revamp their DC program. And they actually have opted to have four. One is a fixed income, one is a stable value, one is an equity, and one is a domestic equity, and one is an international equity. They've kept it very simple. Now, under those 4 positions, they have the ability to build a model that has different investment options in it. But from a participant standpoint, I know, hey, I'm conservative. I want the thing that's just capital preservation. They've kept it very simple, and they've kept it in English. You know, when you open your statement and you see all the names on there, half the time you don't even know what they're talking about. What is the New Discovery Fund? What's that mean? Is that small cap, large cap? What is that? So try to keep it really simple. So I would say you get over 12, you're getting into an environment that's difficult to educate. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes?
You said to focus on what the mission is, in for example, retaining versus attracting. What do you tend to see are the major differences in plans between attracting new candidates as opposed to retaining?
Good question. So when an employer is looking to attract, we'll do a deep analysis on what their competitors are doing. And what they want to look at is, do we offer a Roth? What's our company contribution? How quickly do we vest? So we're looking at all the pieces of the puzzles that when you're talking to an employee that you're trying to recruit, you can say, hey, our competitor down the street is doing X, or you don't even need to say it, they've interviewed there, and you can say, we've got X, Y, and Z, the benefit package looks better. Now, if I have an organization that's not looking to recruit, and they're just really looking to reward, then we might be looking at how do we structure our company contributions to be more favorable to people that have been here longer. And people that haven't been here as long don't get the same type of company contribution. So you can really design your plan. You know, there are some testing things you have to take into account based upon what you're looking to accomplish. So, any other questions?
Can you do that?
You absolutely can. You have to look at coverage testing, but yes, you absolutely
So say
can.
you have employees who've been there 15 plus years, you can increase their company match.
You can, yep.
Oh, okay.
You can increase their company match. You can actually break them down by division, or you can not even increase their company match. You could increase their company contribution at the end of the year. You could do a company contribution that's specifically designed for your employees that have worked for your organization for a longer period of time. You have to look at your organization and your census data. The best thing to do is to run the numbers. And on an annual basis, what we recommend that you do is take the dollar that your organization has earmarked for their benefit package, their retirement package, and then we come back to you and say, this is the best way to use it, based upon what's most important to you. Hey, we're trying to attract people, or wow, we're really trying to reward our employees. So we run that analysis on an annual basis, because every year your organization's probably changing. Once you get your core group, you may not be wanting to attract anymore, you just want to retain them. Any other questions or concerns or comments, thoughts that were brought up? Well, in the back, I'll leave you with one last thing. In the back, there's a form that you can fill out on your average employee. Hey, my average employee is age 45. And if you fax it back to us, we actually send you a report of ideas of how you may want to tweak your plan and how it would actually affect that average participant. And it gives you just a little flavor of how making plan design changes can really have meaningful impact on your participants. But again, go back and make sure you have a mission statement, because if you don't, it's very difficult to get things done. Especially when you have a committee environment. You know, everybody has their 2 cents, but if you have one mission, then they tend to make the decisions a little bit easier. So, any other questions or concerns? I hope this was helpful, and that I touched on things that you can go home with and kind of say, hey, these are the ways that I can build a better retirement program. But I will tell you, I think today, more than ever, it's a societal issue, because if we don't figure out how to get people to be successful in their retirement, we're going to be supporting them in retirement. And that is a scary thing, not for my generation, but I have little kids and I think about that. Geez, who are they going to be supporting? They'll be supporting me and all my friends. I mean, it's just, you know, we've got to address this, because the defined benefit plans aren't there anymore. Moving the defined benefit plans aren't filling the gap. They are the whole kit and caboodle. So we got to get them right. And I think addressing some of the things that we talked about today will help with that. So.
What about getting people to roll their money over from another plan?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, are there any ways that you can, I mean, I've been with my company since February, and I still haven't rolled my own money
Yes.
over, and I know I should.
Yes.
Do you have any ways to encourage people to do that? Or?
We do. We actually work with a group that's a concierge service. And when an employee comes on and they're onboarded, they can actually reach out to the concierge service, and they'll actually gather all of the paperwork. The problem is when you go to roll money out of a former employer and or perhaps your IRA, you tend to fill out tons of paperwork, and you don't know if it's right, and it never gets done. Why is that? Because nobody wants to release those assets. You know, that's money that they're losing. So the concierge service actually does all of the legwork for you, so that it makes it simple and streamlined. and much more efficient. And what happens to you as a participant is that you don't get discouraged and say, oh, forget it, I don't want to do it. I worked for Smith Barney, can't believe that name, is no longer with us, but they had a pension plan. And I was lucky enough a couple of years ago to get a note in the mail that, hey, you have $2,000 at Smith Barney and that plan is no longer in existence, we're going to pay you out. Well, they didn't pay me out, they rolled it into a rollover IRA with Citibank. It's in my maiden name because I started working there when I was in college. So in order for me to roll it out, I need my marriage certificate, I need a passport, a list of things. It's been 2 years. I knew about this. All that's happening is that $2,000 is slowly diminishing because the fees are eating away at it. And why? Because I just don't feel like the hassle. So having the concierge service is really helpful. Yeah. Sure. Any other questions? Great. Well, I appreciate your time today, and please feel free to use us as a resource. And again, feel free to take one of the things on the back if you'd like to kind of see how plan design could affect you. No, one day I'll remember to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.